Thank you so much. Marathon Dersathon continues. And for the even seventh inning stretch, I just wanted to have a little moment of levity here, bringing to order the third panel. This panel's focus is on teaching, and it's already come up several times that in everything that he does, Alan Dershowitz is a teacher, and we have a spectacular panel that includes students, former students, co-teachers, colleagues, and I will not take up any more of their time. We will proceed. I post. He turns his grades in on time, always. He does not cancel class except for Jewish holidays, which I would like to point out, underscoring what Alan Stone just said he was the first person to do. And so when I joined the faculty and said I want to not have class on a Jewish holiday, and no one did it except Alan, it was...
Yeah. All right. First of all, I just want to say it's a great honor for me to be here with all these famous people, to be able to say
name
with Jewish.
Name
With Jewish. You can
name
with Jewish. You can
nigger. I mean, I can't stop.
Name
with Jewish. You can
Nigger.
As a 14-year-old picking up chutzpah for the first time, which was my introduction to Alan Dershowitz, finding so much that inspired me and really shaped the way I think about politics, about Israel, about a lot of issues, but also as a student in his classes, finding my convictions deep into
Freedom and the pursuit of truth, namely, it is certainly more than legitimate to
namely Jewish. You can
why can't we just say what we mean? And this is a nigger. We had Harvey Silverbright as a guest lecturer in his book Nigger. We had Harvey having our weekly kibbutz before our class. Sometimes students would see us and join us. And before the final class, a couple of students came by very sheepishly. They said, there are a lot of rumors as to who the final guest lecturer is going to be. Is it true that the final guest lecturer is going to be O.J. Simpson? And Alan and I planned as our final guest lecturer be O.J. Simpson. It's a treat for those who went all the way through. Simpson got a standing ovation, joined us on stage, and he said, in what was surely a well-practiced line, he say, no, Israel really should be destroyed. It does not have the right to exist. Got a standing ovation, joined us on stage, and he said, in what was surely a well-practiced line, nigger, and the lecture hall erupted with great hilarity. So thank you, Alan, as a teacher, a friend, and as a challenger of taboo.
As a 14-year-old picking up chutzpah for the first time, which was my introduction to Alan Dershowitz. You know, I wasn't always outwardly observant in my Judaism, and everyone's an individual, and he shot back, in his Socratic argumentative style. Well, it's easy for you to say because you're not necessarily outwardly Jewish. It's easy for you to say because you're not necessarily outwardly Jewish. You can hide who you are. That's it. I'm going to prove him wrong every day I go out there. I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to be myself in spite of whatever label, and the label is out there. I refuse to accept that group identity is sort of fungible for some people, not for others, and it really, in a sense, strengthened my opposition to a point he was making. And I don't know if you remember this story, but when I was an undergraduate, there was a senior who burnt down her dorm room when she lit Hanukkah candles, and the administration came down on her like a ton of bricks. You know, she had lit the menorah and she had neglected it, and it had burned down the dorm room, and she was sent to the ad board, and they wanted to suspend her and so forth. And he intervened and said, I will defend you, I will fight the ad board, this is an expression of religious freedom. She eventually just wanted it to all go away, so she sort of declined the intervention, but that's how passionate an advocate he is for students, and in every part. And of course there's his advocacy for Israel, which was mentioned earlier, but he really is a light in the darkness of how one-sided international debate has become. He is person who's contributed through his advocacy on Israel to a broader notion of what it means to be a citizen in the United States. There really is something Jeffersonian about his advocacy, his passion for that cause in pursuing the truth above all else. And that really creates an environment on campus that is unique here for students, particularly Jewish students, but other students who sympathize and empathize with Israel. It's unique in the Ivy League, it's unique all across America.
Together in 1965. That's before together in 1965. That's before participating in a happening. Together in 1965. That's before some of you here were born. He was kind of a magician.
We're going to take a deep breath and a small pause before the last panel, which is...
So maybe we should go back to having something like the Talmud in the old days, where the rabbis would get together and write their ideas and put them down. There has to be a vehicle. Lost during slavery, when we educate millions of people who would take producing some of the great works that we now has found and seen us produced. And 5 years ago, I was in Hamburg speaking to lawyers, German lawyers, and I asked how many of them were victims, directly or indirectly, of the Holocaust. And maybe 3 hands went up of Jewish lawyers to the back of the room. And I said, no, I want to ask you all a question. How many of you have lost parents or loved ones to cancer or heart disease or diabetes or other dreaded illnesses? Every hand went up in the show. And I said, how can you be sure that the cures for those illnesses didn't go up in the smoke of Auschwitz? How can you know you weren't victims? And they all came over to me afterward and they said, you know, they really now think of themselves as victims. Can you imagine how much wisdom the world lost in the Shoah? How much wisdom? I mean, I can't stop. He only touched the tip of the iceberg. I'll be quick, but I'm in the Shoah. How much wisdom in the Shoah? How much wisdom? So we all have to work together to figure out how to, you know, the difference between human beings and other mammals, or other mammals can't communicate their experiences to each other generationally over time. We can, but we don't do a perfect job at it. So my hope is that we can figure out ways of being able to
Take what we've accumulated over all these years and communicate that and make the world a better place. And thank you all for having talked with me, having learned with me, or have taught with me. Because when I teach you, you teach me, and it's been such a great pleasure teaching together, Alan, for almost half a century. Steve, we had such wonderful experiences, and we've had wonderful experiences. So thank you, and let's all...
Jeffrey on the side. What is the connection that you have with Ghislaine Maxwell? What is that relationship? Speak about it, because clearly you knew her at some point.
I met her, I was introduced to her by the Lady Rothschild, Evelyn Rothschild's wife. I was introduced to her, I met her probably between 6 or 7 times, mostly with my wife. We were with her and my wife on a couple of occasions. I saw her being introduced to her by the Lady Rothschild, Evelyn Rothschild.
So thank you, and let's all keep teaching and learning.
We're going to take a deep breath and a small pause before the last panel, which is Alan Dershowitz, Public Intellectual. Don't go away. We'll be back in about 5 minutes.